Hey there, it's Tim from Boston Impressions, and guess what? You've just hit play on the Tell Me Three Things podcast. Great conversations with great people. So what's the deal here? Well, we'll dive into chats with some seriously cool folks from around the world of sales, marketing, and entertainment. But here's the catch. Every guest has to spill three things that gives us a sneak peek into what makes their story different. Welcome to Tell Me Three Things, where every chat might just lead you to discover something totally unexpected. All right. Well, so today I am thrilled to be joined with by Todd Hiller. He is a fire service veteran, author, speaker, TikTok motivator, a full-time advocate for mental wellness and resilience, whether he's leading from the front lines or speaking to a packed room about burnout and balance. Todd's mission is clear: help others walk through fire and come out stronger. And oh, did I mention he makes maple syrup?
That's quite the introduction.
Oh yeah. Well, it's I've done a deep dive for a while since we agreed to do this little interview. Is that, I mean, you've been very involved in TikTok from the early days, 2018, 2019, I was finding. What made you want to do that?
So this is a question I've struggled with. I've asked myself a lot. So when I first started posting, I think it was right around pandemic time, probably like a lot of people, especially a lot of people my generation. And, the first video I posted was of me making hay. It was the hay equipment. And like, I had some video clips. I threw them in there and I was like, oh, it's pretty cool. Like, it will do the music. It will edit them all together. Perfect. And so after like the third video I posted, I said, okay, you're too old to dance on TikTok. You're not going to sing. So what are you doing here? And, I have found over the past 4 or 5 years that, whatever it's been, that really my place sort of there has kind of naturally aligned with my place in the world. I've always loved to talk to people and speak to people. And I've always loved to connect with people and, hear their story and get their take on what they're going through and what they're walking through. And so that kind of lined up. At the same time, I had, a video about the hay equipment. I had some other ones about whatever. And one of the first ones I posted about, it wasn't leadership. I think it was just about kind of like self-help, self-discovery. Don't forget you're doing a great job. Like, you're doing better than you think.
Right.
I got like 3 or 4 messages that were super personalized. Like, you have no idea how much I needed to hear your message. I'm going through an awful time in my life. There was I had no hope. I opened my phone. There you were, like, just throwing out positivity just for the sake of being positive. And so kind of from that point forward, I said, wow, how awesome is that somebody found what I was saying helpful, and useful. And I really got to feed that human connection that I've always loved so much, to try to connect with people and sort of help them. So fast forward all the way now to, 2025, where I do lives in the morning and kind of wake up with people and, have a cup of coffee and just give them a bright way to start their day. Because I think, and I tell my kids, negativity is so loud, and no matter where you look, it's so easy to find. You kind of have to go a little bit further to find something positive. So I do my best to make positivity something really easy to find and really accessible to the people hanging out on TikTok.
Well, it's wonderful. We can get to, I do have a very important question, but I'm going to let that go for a few minutes. But one of the things that you posted, recently is that you were letting go of things. I think I wrote it down. You were letting go, you're walking away from obligations and commitments, and making changes. That might be personal, but I just wanted to find out what that means to you, and what purpose that served in your message on TikTok.
Yeah, so I'll do it high level for sure, and we'll drill down a little bit, but I won't ramble on for too long and take up all your time. But so I found myself 3.5 years ago, give or take. I was so busy. Just as a quick snapshot. So I work full time for the state of Connecticut. I'm a fire service instructor for the state of Connecticut and the regional fire school in my area. I have 2 small kids. I coach their soccer teams. I was doing some speaking on behalf of the fire school, and also just in our social circle within my own department. I was the deputy chief of my fire department. I sat on 4 town boards. I sat on the board of directors for the regional dispatch center in my area. And I still am the president of a nonprofit. And, I got looking at my calendar one day, and I went from meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting. I left one kid's soccer game to go to another kid's baseball game, and left that baseball game to go to a meeting, left that meeting to go back home to try to eat quick. And that, And it was this giant rat race. And for so long, I said, why, why am I doing this? And my answer to myself was, you love serving people, you love helping. And I realized that as much as I loved serving, there really wasn't a whole lot left of myself to give to all the people I was trying to serve. So
Mm,
I sat down one day and I said, I'm not doing this to myself anymore. And one of the things I love speaking to people about is their own personal journey and, doing what they love and pursuing what makes them happy. And I realized I was so walked into and not over my head, but I was so deeply involved in so many different things that I had no capacity to do anything, one, that made me happy, on my spare time. And two, I didn't have any capacity left for like anything else to either go wrong or to come along the line. So I wrote 2 letters of resignation that night. I was on the board of finance at the time in my town, and I was also on the Inland Wetlands Agency. I wrote 2 letters of resignation. I brought them to the chairman and I dropped them off. And what they said still to this day floors me. I was nervous. I'm like, I've been on the Wetlands Agency for like 11 years. I was elected to the Board of Finance in the town election. I'm like, walking away, they're going to be so angry. And I gave them to them and they were like, man, it's about time. And I was like, I mean, it's about time. And they said you're busier than anybody else in this town that we know. Like, we're amazed you have lasted this long.
right.
And that was like the first domino that tipped and said, hey, I gave the analogy like it was like a good breakup with a bad person. Like you really didn't want to have to go through it, but gosh, once it was over, it felt so good. So that kind of opened my eyes to, hey, listen, you have just taken 2 big things off your plate. How does it feel? And introspectively, I kind of said, boy, it feels pretty good. And at first I felt a little selfish, like, oh, I'm just excited because I have more free time. But I realized that the things I was still involved in were getting such a better version of me because I wasn't drawn so thin and I wasn't spread out so much between those different commitments. So since then, we've taken another few things off my plate. And so the message on TikTok was about walking away from things that no longer serve you because quite frankly, some things just didn't excite me anymore. Some things didn't light me up when I said, yes, I get to do these things. And other things, I didn't walk away completely, but I wanted to give that message to folks, online that it's okay to change the way you show up for certain commitments too. You don't have to say, hey, I'm done forever. I'm never coming back. But you can certainly say, I'm going to change the way I show up for this. I'm going to change, I don't want to have a leadership role anymore. I just want to be another one of the folks here. Or you can say, I don't want to come to every single meeting and be on all the planning committees. I just want to come and maybe come to the big event every year and help the best I can. So it was kind of a message to tell people, because I think people in general get that a lot, right? They get involved in one thing. And once people or once groups find out you're good at being involved, then everybody finds out, right? The old game of telephone, especially in a small town, and everybody's like, oh, ask him, he'll do it.
Right.
And I think there's a lot of people that struggle with that because they want to help and they want to serve and they don't want to seem selfish, like, oh, well, I have time, I can do this. But I think it's a very slippery slope that leads to people falling headfirst down the well of overcommitment. And then it's so hard to walk yourself out of it. It's super easy to fall into overcommitment. It's really difficult to walk away from it.
Well, I'm sure that I think I got her name right. Colette will love your wife. Love to have more time with you as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and my kids, it's funny. I posted a video on TikTok, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago that's gotten a little bit of traction, but I was talking, it's one of them, well, 2 of them actually. I have the best conversations with my kids and sometimes they bring up these things to my attention and I'm like, wow, like why didn't I think of that? I'm supposed to be this intelligent person who can speak about lots of things and an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old rock my world with their questions. And my 8-year-old son asked me, he said, why don't grown-ups play more? And I said, "Well, what do you mean, buddy?" And he said, "Well, you come on the trampoline with us, you play soccer with me." And he's like, "But we're like grown-ups don't play together. Like they don't go outside and play. They just." And I had that split second where I'm like, all right, I'm in parent mode where I'm going to say, buddy, we got to get you to sports practice and your sister, we got to make dinner, we got to grocery shop, we got to work, like this whole list of things why we don't play. And then I thought better of it. I said, you know what, buddy, you're right. Grown-ups should play more. We should take the time to go outside for no other reason than just to be outside and hang out with friends. And my daughter had a great question to me about change. And that led into another really good video.
Yeah.
That is such a great message. So yeah, conversations and time with them, not only is it refreshing to just have that as a core family unit,
Mm.
but also they're giving me some good ideas to think about when we have that
Right.
time for more conversation.
You got your own built-in content creators, managers right
Yeah.
there. Yeah, that's great.
Yep. They're
You know,
liking it.
TikTok aside, can you talk a little bit about your well, first of all, how does a theater major become a fireman? You know, how does that happen? And I have to ask you what your favorite role was when you were on stage.
Oh, no problem. So when I was well, the easy answer is I was a firefighter long before I was ever in a theater production because I tried to go to fire calls with my dad when I was 8. He was a volunteer in the same department I am now, and I remember one day he went to this big fire right up the road from our house, and in my like 8 or 9 year old brain, I thought, well, it's really close to home. I can go, and mom won't care. So I went out to the truck, and my mother's like, "Where are you going?" And I said, "Well, can I go with dad?" She said, "No, you can't go with your father. He's going to a fire." So I joined the
Right.
volunteer fire service when I was 14, fell in love with it. I have held every rank within my department except treasurer. I've been a lieutenant, a captain, a deputy chief, the secretary at one point. So I fell in love, and my servant's heart, that I ended up so overcommitted with, has always loved to serve the town. So fast forward, we get to high school, and I go off to college. And well, actually, before that, when I was in high school, I was a freshman. I went and saw the movie or the production of Godspell at my high school. And they were doing the curtain call, and like everybody looked so happy and so together. And that connection that they all had that I've always craved of being connected to people, I was like, man, like I want to do that. That sounds so cool or looks so
Right.
cool. So my homeroom teacher was the theater director. I go into school the next day or whatever, and I asked him, how do I do this? He said, well, the production's over for the spring, but next fall when we start school again, you can audition. Awesome. So I auditioned for West Side Story, hoping to get a small part where I could stand in the back and watch what they did and just, be a wallflower. And my homeroom teacher cast me as Riff. And if you've never seen West Side Story, that's one of the three leads. And I said to him, are you out of your mind? I said, I have never acted a day in my life. I'm not a childhood actor. I'm nothing. Like you're starting from scratch. And he said, he said, I've known you. You've been in my homeroom. He said, you're a fantastic storyteller. And he said, you have such a beautiful personality. He said, you're such a great communicator. You'll be fine. And I'm thinking, I will not be fine. And his name was Les Ober. And I still am in touch with him to this day. And, I said to him, God, I'm thankful though that he did throw me into it because I had no choice but to jump in with both feet. So from there, I never looked back. I did every production in high school that I could from that point on, and then I did every production in college that I could fit into my schedule. Um, and so, yeah, that I got that question a lot though in college too. A friend of mine, she said to me, "I have no idea how a small town farm kid can be a theater major." She's like, "I don't mean to stereotype, but where did this come from?" But I learned I had an acting professor in college when I spent a semester in London, and he told me being an actor has nothing to do with how well you can be an actor on stage. It has everything to do with how well you can tell a story. And he said, clearly, someone in your life is very good at telling stories, and you got that from them. And I said, well, my dad and my grandfather were both, and still to this day. Well, my grandfather's dead, but he is a great storyteller. My father's an epic storyteller, and so he said that's what you need to be a good actor. So I didn't necessarily fit the stereotypical bill for a theater kid, but gosh, I sure did like it a whole lot. I acted all the way through college, directed a couple of one acts my senior year. That was part of our senior project that we had to do. And if I had to pick a favorite role, I'm going to give you two. I loved being Riff in West Side Story. One, because that was the role that shoved me into, like, I didn't have a choice then. I had to go all in and actually act and figure it out. But I also got to play John Proctor in The Crucible. And musicals
Nice.
are always happy and always fun, and people laugh and they love them. They're silly. And for the first time when we did The Crucible, I looked out at towards the end, and like, here's my poor mother sobbing because I played John Proctor, and they have to kill me in the end of the play.
Right.
And the way that my director did it was so wonderfully done. It wasn't actual, like, he didn't actually hang me on stage, thankfully. Um, but like I looked out, and my mom, and like people I had never met before were sobbing. And I wasn't happy that they were crying, but I was happy that I had enough of a connection with those people through a story that I got to tell on Arthur Miller's behalf, that I could actually bring them to that different place and kind of connect with them. So I'm going with Riff and John Proctor, those two.
Wonderful. Well, I'm a little bit older than you, but I'd say in 2009, after not doing a show since freshman of high school, on a bet, I went out for Anything Goes, a local community theater thing, and I was cast as businessman number two. And and here we are, 20 shows later, from shows like Guys and Dolls to Company to Next to Normal to Mamma Mia. Yeah, I've been nominated Best Actor in New Hampshire a couple of times, but it's just, when I saw that you were a theater major, I'm like, oh, we're going to be best friends,
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
on,
for
and
sure.
on top of that, my assistant Lori, who's in the other room, her daughter goes to Roger Williams. So
I heard she told me in her email. That's so awesome. That's so exciting. When I got asked to do some shows after college and I never found the time, and now I kick myself because I'm like, I wish I did. But my daughter she's kind of itching to maybe start that. So I think maybe if she's gonna drag me into some community stuff with her, and won't lie, I am very excited if she
yeah,
does. I'll go with
yeah,
her
that's
happily.
that
So
sense of community, like you talked about, is something that I experienced, and it's something that would be great for your daughter and yourself probably to get back into it. All right,
yep.
so you're an author as well. When did you find time to write two novels?
Right.
The first one, Fire and Ivory, which is a psychological thriller following a 21-year-old Amanda who escapes captivity and must recover physically and emotionally while undercovering a shocking betrayal by someone close to her. Where did that come from in your head?
So another really good question, and I've always loved to write. And I remember this is one of those things. And so if there's any parents listening, if there's any young kids listening, please encourage your kids to do what they're passionate about and don't worry too much about like they don't fit the bill for, oh, well, that's not what you should be doing. Like, nobody's going to grow up and pay you to do, underwater basket weaving or whatever, but follow your passions because when I was a kid, I used to write lots of stuff, poems and and I'm talking like 9, 10 years old poems, silly songs, short stories, and they're awful because I was 9, and one day when I was 12, I had to write something for school. We had to write a short story in like 6th, I think I was in 7th grade, and my best friend Brian hit both of his parents were principals of local schools. And so they were at the house one day, we were hanging out, and I gave his mom asked me to see my story, and she read it, and she said, "I don't ever want you to stop writing." And I was like, "Why?" And she said, "This is incredibly written for a 12-year-old, first of all." She said, "And it's very clear that you really liked writing it." And I said, "Well, I did. It was fun to write." So I've always written poems and stories. I was a theater major in college, but I also took English lit courses. I took poetry courses. I took writing courses. I took creative writing courses. And so 2000, I think 11, I started this book called Fire and Ivy. It had a different name when we first started. I wrote probably 80 pages of it, and then all of a sudden life got busy. We got engaged, we got married, we built a house. We had our first baby on the way, and I'm like, all right, well, I'm out of time to write. So it lived on my laptop. And one day I was switching laptops from a new to an old one, and I found it, and I said, oh, and I heard this voice from my best friend's mom saying, I don't ever want you to stop writing. I'm like, well, pick it back up and see how it goes. So fast forward to there, I started in, I think, 2016 or 17. I started writing some more. And the idea for the story came, so there was someone that I knew in high school who had something very, very traumatic happen to her. And no one really knew. She confided in me one day because she told me she felt safe with me. She was someone who, she asked me for a ride home from school one day. I'm like, well, you got like 20 other people to choose from, but I'll give you a ride home. And, after about the third time she asked, I kind of said, why me? And so she told me this story and said, I feel very safe with you, because I've always been a big dude. I'm always a lot bigger than my classmates.
Yeah.
And so I said, well, that's very kind. But the one thing that stuck with me forever was she never told anyone it happened, no authorities, and nothing ever happened to the people who were responsible for this awful thing that happened to her. And that bothered me when I was in high school. It bothered me like a lot on so many levels for the obvious reasons. And then even when I was an adult, when I started writing the story, it didn't start that way. It kind of started with the story of her and one of the other characters. I knew I wanted to be a recovery story, and so it kind of walked back into that thing that happened at the beginning because I said, "How awful to have this happen to you and never have any recourse. No one was ever held responsible, and so that's a weight she has to carry forever, for the rest of her life." So that was kind of the start of it, and then I didn't want it to just be about that, because that's a pretty heavy beginning. And I'm a pretty happy person. I'm a pretty, optimistic person, so I wanted to walk the story to, um, a nicer conclusion, albeit still a little bit one that's left a little unsettled at the end. There is a book too that's a sequel to Fire and Ivy that's just not done yet, that has been waiting in the wings for a long time. It's written, just not edited. My wife's like, "Listen, all the edits are done on paper. Just let's put it in the laptop, dude. Let's go. Do your poking and hoping." So,
Yeah.
but yeah, so I wanted to tell a story that was powerful, and I wanted to tell a story that gave some people some hope, and also kind of gave people the echoed the message that it's okay to stand up for yourself and tell somebody, because God, I hated the idea that she never told anybody because she was so scared.
Well, someone who has made a career out of saving people, not only physically from harm with a fire, but also mentally through the messaging that you are constantly putting out on TikTok and social. That must have been very hard for you to carry as well. So maybe that was a little therapy for you to get that
Yep.
your chest, right?
Maybe.
Right.
Yeah. Maybe
Well,
for
you have
sure.
two beautiful children. So then you wrote another book called The Adventures of Froggy and Little Bear, a new friend. It's a charming children's picture book about a bear who loses his blue hat and finds friendship and teamwork along the way with Froggy. So was that written for your children?
Yes. So when my daughter was little, I nicknamed her Froggy. When she was very young, still in the stages where the doctors tell you they can't move a lot, she would kick her legs like a frog. Anytime, you had to get her dressed or change her, she was just, an energetic little thing. And so I said, man, I see like you're like a little frog. And so the name Froggy kind of stuck for a while. And so then when my son was kind of born, we used to say, "Oh, like he's like a little bear." He was always super happy. He always snuggled up. He always liked to be bundled up. I see, look, he looks like a little bear all wrapped up in there. So the idea for the characters was kind of to echo my kids and their nicknames, but the idea of the kind of the unexpected teamwork kind of came along the lines of we as people. And one of the things I've always wanted to teach my kids is that different people can be really helpful a lot of times, because different people are good at different things. So even if you're really good at something and you say, well, this other person's not that great at this one thing, even if they are really good at something else, you can be tremendously helpful to each other sometimes if you just learn that it's okay to embrace your differences. And so the story kind of wound its way to that. And I wanted to, I didn't want to write another novel for kids, but I wanted to get them a message, for all the kids that read it, say, hey, listen, you would never know who might be helpful that you might meet along the way. Just because somebody looks different, or just because somebody, doesn't have the same skills as you, doesn't mean they're not going to be helpful in your life someday.
Is there a sequel to that in the works as well?
Well, so if my kids had it that way, there would be 67 of them. Then they would have met Santa by now, the Easter Bunny. They would have gone to the beach. They would have had all these adventures. But that one, not yet,
Well,
not yet.
I could just see it now, a froggy on the shelf instead of an elf on the shelf. I mean, I'm just trying to help you out here.
There you go.
I could see Froggy having all kinds of accessories like the Froggy race car and camper. That would be
Perfect.
really nice.
Yep.
All right, so tell me a little bit about your coaching and your speaking side gig. Is that something that is the future for you once you retire from all of the other things that you're doing?
Yeah, I hope so. And so I'd like to do it congruently too. So I think I've been speaking to people in the educational world since 2014. I work full time for the state of Connecticut. I started working on the road in 2013, fixing guardrails, plowing snow, all that kind of fun stuff. About 13 months later in 2014, they said, hey, we need a training coordinator, someone to teach all the things that we have to teach: CPR, first aid, hazmat, fall protection, chainsaw. Like, we have a new employee class they run that teaches people to do all kinds of stuff, including plow snow. And so they kind of asked around, everybody want to do it. So I just about ran to a computer to email the people to say, yes, please, I want to do it. And I was lucky enough that they said, well, okay, come on down. So I started teaching for the state in 2014. When I stopped doing that, I got my new position I still work for the state, but a new position in 2019. I didn't teach for the state anymore. So I said, "Oh, I'll be okay." And my wife said, "No, you won't." I lasted about 6.5 months. And then I applied to work at the regional fire school near me because I needed to teach and I needed to speak to people. And I've always craved that connection with people and the passing along of a message. And I needed to find a way to do that. So I did it with the fire school, teaching both hands-on stuff and classroom stuff, both, and teaching within my own department too. And so then when social media started kind of working its way into my life, especially TikTok, and all these people had sort of told me how much my messages were resonating with them, I thought, well, man, I don't just want to do it on TikTok talking to my phone. I would love to find people who need to hear this message as a, whether it's in their job, whether it's in their personal life, whether it's within their company or whatever it is. So I kind of started reaching out to some folks about that. And I really am hoping that I can walk my way from the educational side of things, which I will still do because I do love to teach, especially at the fire school, because I've been in the fire service so long. But I really would like to sort of walk into that as definitely the future side, steady side gig. And then maybe, hopefully someday, the future all the time gig. And maybe I'll tell the state, thanks very much, but it's time for me to go.
Make a lot of money, being a guest speaker. That's for sure. So tell me, is that teaching on the side for the state? Is that where the No Box Big Enough program came from?
So that was yes and no. The No Box Big Enough was kind of my first toe dip into the world of public speaking. And I designed a program that I wanted to present to young people, high school and college students, to tell them that they don't have to be one thing for the rest of their lives. When I was younger, I'm not sad that I went to college, but had you explained to me what college tuition was going to look like on the student loan end once I graduated, I may have rethought my decision. But I think there's so many kids that when they're 17 years old, we say, "What do you want to do with the rest of your life?" And they say, I don't know." There's some grown-ups, there's some adults that I talk to that I ask what they want to do, and they're like, "I don't know." But I never wanted kids I always wanted kids to understand they didn't have to just be one thing. And that's kind of the idea of the box. I said there should never be a box big enough for you to fit you and all the things you've done and pursued in your life in. You should always outgrow it, because I think we as people, when we get good at something and we get comfortable at it, we kind of say, well, let's just do this forever because this is what I'm good at. I have a friend who he was an accountant for 30 years and he hated 29 and a half of them, but he did it because he was really good at math. And as I kind of got, researching this idea, I also found out one of my favorite stories. There was a football player, and I'm not going to say his name because I'm going to get it wrong now. He was inducted into the NFL Hall of Fame. He was a running back. And when he got up to give his acceptance speech, he said, "I play football and there's one sport that I actually hate, and it's football." And so I did this deep dive into this guy, and he also hated running, and he was a running back. So he hated to play football, but he was always so good at it that the people in his life told him, "You're great at this. You should keep doing it." And I think teenagers and young adults and 20 somethings in college, they take so much, they carry what the adults in their lives say so deeply, and they say, well, they're older than me, they must know better than me, and they kind of get locked into doing the things that other people tell them to do, and it leaves them missing out on all the things they might want to be doing. And so the idea behind No Box Big Enough was, listen, tell your kids, and if it was in a school setting of a high school, listen, you're about to go to college, find something you like to do and pursue it. If you don't know, don't just go because your buddy's going. Your friend's going to be a math major because he loves math, or he's going to be a physics major because he's a huge physics guy. Don't just say, well, I guess I better go too, if that's not what you want to do. So No Box Big Enough was a little bit from the fire school, but really more from my own high school experience and my own college experience to say, hey, if you had given yourself the opportunity to do this over and to walk backwards through this and change some things, I would still go to college. But gosh, Tim, there's so many other things that I would pursue along the way. I wouldn't necessarily give up on anything, but I would find different things to pursue. I made the analogy in a video one day of, for a long time, I just kind of let my boat of life drift, and I would deal with wherever I ended up and say, oh, this is okay. I can make this work. It took me a long time to realize that I'm the one steering the ship. don't just let it drift. Aim where you want it to go and point it where you want it to go, and get yourself there. And even if you don't make the mark the very first time, you're at least walking towards what you want to get to. So, and since then, I've talked to lots of high schoolers that were like, man, and even young adults who were like, yeah, tell me about it. Guilty right here. Got my right hand high in the air that I just went along to go along in high school, went to college because my friends were going, picked a major because I thought it was safe, or picked a major because my parents thought it was a great idea. And they're like, I really wish I could do it again because I would have done things so differently. And I think if we get the message out sooner rather than later, it gives them the chance to be proactive instead of either reactive or even regretful.
Well, that is a wonderful message, and I know we all have taken a right when we wish we had taken a left in our lives. Things happen for a reason. Being a motivator as you are, everyone gets down. Everyone needs to lean on someone that is special, whether it be your wife or your father. Who is the person in your life that when things aren't, just sparking, who is that person that you lean into to set you right on the right course?
So you're definitely my family, but and my wife. But the one thing I always try to make sure I do, because I have that servant's heart, I never want to hand somebody something that's too heavy. I'm always like, oh well, they've got their own stuff going on; they don't need all of my stuff. So I
Right.
kind of try to spread it out. I have like I said, I have a best friend who I've known since I was 3 years old, and he and I are still. He still also lives in Connecticut. We're still friends. So I kind of spread it out between my wife and my family, and him, and just I feel like one of the things too that I've always tried to tell myself, especially lately, is that if you control your reactions to things and give just a little bit of space when things go wrong, the things you have to bring to other people and ask for help with seem a little less severe. So before I dump anything on anybody's lap or in anybody's lap, I always try to just give it some space and let some time go by and then bring it to them in a way that's more productive and proactive. And I'm also, when I say my family, I obviously my wife, but I'm so blessed that my mom and dad both still live very close to me. My dad lives 2.5 miles in one direction, and my mom and stepdad live a mile and a half in the other direction. So I think having a family unit that is still very much whole and connected is just, it does, I'm so blessed, and it does me a great service when it comes to those things, because I know that I have such a great support system. And I think a lot of times that keeps it from getting too far weighted down to begin with.
Right. So that is, yeah, absolutely. So tell me a little bit about your farm. I mean,
Oh, all right. So
yeah.
yeah. My great grandfather moved there in 1926. So next year we're coming up on 100 years of being on the same piece of dirt.
Wow.
And it was, I made a joke last year we were making maple syrup, and I said something like, oh, if this weather doesn't cooperate, maybe we won't do this next year. And I was actually on a TikTok live, and my friend Josh, who was a fellow farmer in a few towns over, he was like, you cannot stop now. He's like, 2 years from now, it's going to be 100 years. He's like, what are you, out of your mind? So I said, yeah, I didn't look at it that way. But so 1926, my great grandfather showed up, and actually, along the roots of teaching, and I really haven't drawn this connection till right now. So my great grandfather was a teacher. He was a high school teacher, and back in the day, the VOAG program or the FFA program, it's had a bunch of different names.
Yep.
At one of the schools near me, they weren't big enough to have a farm. They didn't have animals at the school. They needed a place to go to raise animals, to grow a garden, to learn how to operate equipment. And so that was my great grandfather's farm. He was the VOAG farm. So he brought all of his students there. They raised cows, pigs, sheep, anything you can think of. He had dairy cows at one point. And so he was not only a teacher, but he was also teaching through the FFA program and the ag program on his farm, hands on. They were the first ones to start making maple syrup there because he was a teacher. Maybe this is one of the places I get my love for teaching. Who knows? And so fast forward, when he was older, my mom and dad started dating, and my dad is a carpenter by trade. He's been banging nails for, yeah. What's he always say? I've been banging nails for a paycheck since 1968. So he um he helped my great grandfather do a lot of stuff at the farm. He helped them reside the barn. Him and his brothers painted it. They shingled the roof. So when it came time to buy it, he said to my father, you have done more to this place in the past 5 years since you've been dating my granddaughter than anybody else. Do you and Colleen, that's my mom, do you guys want to buy it when I get old and dead someday? And so they said, okay. So he had life rights to live there. And then when he passed, my parents bought the farm, no pun intended, from him. That was 1980. My brother was born in 81. I was born shortly thereafter in 84. And we stayed there right up until, well, my dad still lives there now. I moved out and built a house in 2012, but so I still manage it. My dad still lives there. We still keep beef cows. We've kind of gotten away from chickens, but we make our own hay in the summertime. We make maple syrup in the springtime, so it's enough to keep me busy.
Yeah.
That's for sure. Yep.
Well,
But it's
that dovetails really nicely into the question. Now, I got to be honest, we've been having this conversation before I even asked you here in the studio, before I even asked you to speak with me. We have a completely and I think you did a TikTok on it. How do you say the word syrup? What is the correct pronunciation of the word syrup? Because we have some people are syrup, we have some people that are syrup. So in fact, one of your TikToks got it. I thought I saw it right, because you have a lot of them, and I've scrolled through a lot of them, like 800,000 impressions. And it was the one that it's time to say goodbye to
yeah.
2024. And it was all about syrup. And I'm like, this is going to be perfect. I get a true professional to settle the argument for us once and for all. What is it?
I'm gonna say, I say maple syrup. But I know a lot of people say syrup. A lot of people, there's a lot of pronunciation. So, yep. And yeah, isn't it wild? So that video I put up, like I needed content, right? Every creator's, so I'm going through B-roll videos that I have to try to get something out one day. And I'm like, oh, I got video of us taking down the buckets that, we're washing them and whatever else.
Yep.
And I put a voiceover to it, and all of a sudden, like, it did really well. And fast forward, now it's been almost a year. It's almost to 1 million views. I'm like, well, I guess I should have done that more often. So
Yeah.
but yeah, so I'm going with maple syrup. Your viewers are gonna probably start commenting right now that it's wrong, but
Yeah.
that's
No,
how I've always said it.
it's mostly the people that work here. I'm a syrup guy as well. There are some syrup people here, and I don't know. We'll have to talk about that at their next review. All right. So I'm gonna I'm not gonna keep you much longer, but the name of this podcast is called "Tell Me Three Things." Right. So we never leave the show without asking someone to tell us three things about themselves that maybe even the closest people in their lives might not know. And you'd be amazed. Some of the people we've spoken to have really given us some juicy things. But so before I let you go, tell me three things about yourself that you may not have shared and that people may not know.
Oh man. All right. Let's see. Number one, I was 300 feet. Well, I can't tell you that one because I made a TikTok about that, so that can't count. That can't count. I was going to tell you about the day my grandfather died, but I can't do that because a lot of people know about that one. Boy, three things right on the spot. Three things that not many people know. I love all kinds of music, country, hip hop, rock and roll, pop, heavy metal, oldies. I don't care what it is. If it makes me move my feet and kind of want to sing along and move my body, I don't care who wrote it, what the lyrics are. I just love good music. Um, the second thing is I once got dragged up my dad's driveway, which is almost 1,000 feet long, on my knees by my grandfather's pickup truck. I went to jump on the back. The movie The Newsies was popular at the time, and in the trailer, one kid runs up and he jumps on the back of the old fashioned news
Yep.
truck.
Yep.
In my brain, the news truck was only probably going 6 miles an hour in the movie, so I tried to do it as my grandfather pulled in one day. Didn't know that he was going a lot faster, and I wasn't going to be able to pull myself up at the age of 10 or whatever I was. So he dragged me up the driveway on my knees because I didn't want to let go and fall, and I couldn't pull myself up. I didn't want to tell anybody because I didn't want my grandfather to get in trouble. I did finally tell my mom because I was bloody from the knee down when I went inside. But that was the story. I never wanted my grandpa to get in trouble. Never wanted him to be like my mom to think he was a bad grandfather because he didn't know it. Because I didn't yell or anything. I just jumped on as he drove
Yeah.
by.
Yeah.
And the third one we'll do. What am I gonna say? All right, we'll do another vehicle related one. So I one day I was home on the farm doing things that farm kids do, driving my dad's pickup truck around. He didn't mind that I drove it. I was like 12, I think, or 13, 14. I would use it to do chores. I'd bring in firewood with it, all kinds of stuff. He didn't mind, but there was this embankment, like it goes down and it flattens out to this little turnaround spot, and there was running boards in the truck, and my parents were away for the day, and I thought I'm gonna be cool and just put this thing in four-wheel drive, and I'll drive right over that, and down we'll go. And so I went to drive over it, and the front wheels ended up not touching the ground because and it was sitting on the running boards. The back wheels were barely touching the grass, and it was just stuck. And I'm like, now what do I do? My mom's car was gone. We didn't have the size tractor we have now that I could tug it with the tractor. And not to mention, like, I didn't want it to roll downhill and smash anything. So I called my grandfather. He lived across the street. And literally until the day he died, he told me he got it unstuck. We pulled it off. He made sure the truck was okay. He went home. He said, "Your grandmother's not home." He said, "I'm not going to tell a soul that this happened. Don't you worry about it." And I figured, yeah, right. My dad's going to know, before Sunday afternoon.
Right.
And I asked my mom and dad probably 2 years ago, and he died in 2014. I asked them 2 years ago if they had ever heard the story, and they were like, "What are you talking about?" And so I said, apparently he was true to his word. He never told a soul. So my mom and dad know now because I told them. But like, it was always, I never wanted to tell my family, never wanted to tell, like, the other people that helped us do stuff, because I'm like, how embarrassing. I was the cool kid who got to drive at like 14 to do farm chores, and I royally screwed up. Yeah, I royally screwed up.
That's good.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm going to let you go, but I just want to thank you. You are an inspiration and a motivation to a lot of people on a daily basis. I enjoy popping in and listening to you for a few minutes. I think that your life is rich, and you're blessed in so many ways. But I think you're smart enough to realize that you're one of these people that should probably share some of their blessings back to people. And I speak for probably thousands of people who follow you to say thank you for that. And you and I are only about 2.5 hours away from each other. So someday when I'm out in the Springfield area or headed that way, or maybe a yard goats game, we
Yes,
can meet up and have a cup of coffee or a beer or something. But I just am great.
absolutely.
I'm so grateful for you taking the time to speak with me. I could probably talk to you for another hour. There's so many things that I had on my list, but I want to be respectful of your time and just say thank you very much.
Yeah, well, thank you too. That's a quite the list of accolades, and thank you so much for your kind words. I if nothing else, hope that, like I said, that the starfish story. There's a guy walking along throwing starfish into the ocean, and somebody said to him, "There's millions of beach. It's never going to make a difference." And he said, "Well, it made a difference to that one." I'm always rooting for the one. Whether I speak to 50,000 people who watch a video or see me, or I speak to one person. That help and that human connection has always been something I've loved to give to people. And like you said, pass along my blessings. I am such a blessed person. My family lives close by. We're healthy. We're happy. I have the ability to speak to friends like you and kind of connect with people across the world. So I will happily share those blessings with others and keep right on going as long as they'll let me. So I appreciate your time too. Thank you so much for the talk. It's been great.
Thank you very much, and we'll see you on TikTok tomorrow morning.
All right, Tim. Thanks very much.